In this world, healers have been recognized for their exceptional abilities and are often given positions of power as a result. There is even a royal academy dedicated to training the nation's best healers. As a healer, you are usually going to be classed as first, second, or third rate. But then we have Zenas, who doesn't even have a license to use healing magic. However, it hasn't stopped him from helping people whenever he can. So he opened a small office on the edge of the kingdom so he can treat the people who need his help. Once he is done healing the man who came to his office, the man thanks him. But he doesn't have much to pay Zenas with, so he offers him all the money in his pocket. Zenas is fine with it because he is not doing this for personal profit, and after the man leaves, his assistant, Lily, comes in to remind him that he got a house call. Zenas says he is going to head out immediately, so Lily tells him she will have dinner waiting when he gets back. A few hours later, Zenas is done with his house call and is on his way back home. But while he is walking down the street, he notices a wolf girl who looks like she is in terrible pain. Just then, a noble catches up with the girl and starts yelling at her. He asks where she has been, so the girl tries to explain that her stomach was hurting really badly, so she tried going to the hospital, but they wouldn't treat her because she didn't have any money. The noble looks at her like she's stupid and a stomach ache isn't enough to warrant a trip to the hospital, especially not for a slave like her with no health insurance. He then drags her off and says she should get back to work immediately. The noble takes the cemetery and throws her to the ground, causing her to smash her head on a tombstone. He really must not care about her health because an injury like that is enough to kill a person. Plus, after the girl rolls over on the ground in pain, some scary black energy went into her, so I'd be very concerned. However, the noble has the observational skills of a blind man, so he thinks the girl is faking it and tells her to get back on her feet immediately. She obviously can't do that because of the severe pain. The noble walks over to her body and threatens to put her in one of these graves if she doesn't listen to him, but she can barely move, so he proceeds to kick her across the floor. The noble is sick of waiting around for her, so he says she should hurry up and start looking around the cemetery for anything of value. He then starts walking away, and maybe it's the severe pain or the fact that she got possessed, but the girl snaps and slashes the noble across the stomach. The noble is in disbelief at first because he has never been injured so badly before. He tries reasoning with the wolf girl, but then he remembers how he was kicking her a second ago, and she looks like she's out for blood, so there's no point in trying to negotiate. He starts running away at the speed of a light jog because that's as fast as he can go, and the noble definitely would have died here. But by some miracle, Zenas happened to be in the area, so he runs to him for help. He tells Zenas that his slave went crazy and is trying to kill him, but Zenas saw the way he treated her back on that street, so he is pretty sure that the noble deserved it. The wolf girl eventually catches up with the noble, so he begs Zenas to save him. Zenas takes one look at her, and he can clearly see the dark energy around her, so he asks the noble what he was doing when the girl went out of control. The noble doesn't want to admit that he was trying to get her to rob some graves for him, so he just says he was farming for loot. That's definitely illegal, but he tries to change the topic and reminds Zenas that he is severely injured, so he needs to get to a hospital right away. He even offers to pay Zenas if he can save him from the girl, but Zenas doesn't care about money. However, he also took an oath to save people's lives, so when the girl charges at the noble, Zenas pulls him out of the way in time. The girl then throws a bunch of rocks at Zenas, so he skillfully evades them without much effort. If he is skilled enough to do that, the noble thinks he should be able to kill the girl, but Zenas firmly refuses because he has a strict no-kill rule. The noble tells him to stop spouting that dark knight nonsense, because if Zenas doesn't kill that girl right now, then she might end up killing the noble. But Zenas still refuses because as a healer, his goal is to save as many people as possible, and immediately after saying this, he proceeds to punch straight through a rock that the girl threw at him. And I'm pretty sure healers can't normally do that. Zenas can tell that the girl is incredibly fast, in fact she is way faster than a demi-human should be, so he knows something is wrong. He doesn't want to hurt her too badly, so as the girl tries to slash him, he pulls up a shield, and as soon as she makes contact, she gets flung backwards into a nearby building. Incidentally, this also causes a piece of the building to collapse right next to the noble, and Zenas is fast, so he totally could have saved the noble, but he simply chose not to. Now that everything has calmed down, Zenas walks over to the girl's body, and her leg is broken from the fall, so she is struggling to get away. She is still feral, so Zenas lets her bite onto his arm to keep her in one place. He has figured out that she is possessed, so he puts his hand on her head and starts healing her to get the spirit out. He is successful, but he is still a little curious as to what she could possibly have been doing to make a spirit possess her. In any case, he still needs to take care of the ghost, so he uses his powers to exorcise it. He then turns back to the girl, and now that she is back to normal, he heals her broken leg so she can walk again. The noble sees this as he pulls himself out from under the rubble, and he is amazed that Zenas is powerful enough to heal a broken leg instantly. He is still badly hurt, so he pleads with Zenas to save him, but Zenas says he actually just clocked out for the day, so the noble will have to wait until tomorrow to get healed. The noble knows he is going to bleed out in a couple of hours, so he begs Zenas to heal him right now. Zenas eventually agrees, but he says it's going to cost him extra. The noble doesn't care about the price, so he gives Zenas all the money he has. This is well above the current market rate for healing, so he assures Zenas should be satisfied, but to his surprise, Zenas says this is nowhere near enough. He doesn't usually care about payment, but considering how scummy the noble was acting earlier, Zenas is feeling very capitalistic right now. The noble threatens to report Zenas for extortion, but that wouldn't bother him since he doesn't have a license in the first place. He is technically an illegal healer, but the noble probably knows all about illegal stuff considering the fact that he has been grave robbing. Anyway, Zenas is willing to make a deal, so he tells the noble that he is willing to accept alternative payment, so in addition to the gold, he wants to take the noble's slave. The noble never cared about the girl anyway, so he agrees to Zenas' terms, and as soon as Zenas heals him, he hands over the girl's slave contract. The noble then walks off in a fit of rage, so Zenas sits on the floor next to the girl and waits for her to wake up. When she finally regains consciousness, she is surprised to see a man sitting next to her, and asks him who he is. Zenas tells her his name, and explains that he just bought her, so from now on she is his slave. With that out of the way, he tells Till to take off her clothes immediately. Till gets flustered and asks him if he's serious, but Zenas isn't joking. He says he paid a lot for Till, so he needs to make sure his property is in good condition. Till eventually does as he says since she can't disobey her master, and once Zenas gets a good look at her body, he can immediately tell what's wrong. He noticed that she was in pain earlier, and that's because she has a gallstone blocking her bile duct. It should be easy enough for him to fix, so he reaches for her stomach and uses magic to perform the operation. In an instant, the gallstone is removed, and Till no longer feels any pain, so she asks Zenas what he did. Zenas explains that all he did was open up her stomach, extract the gallstone, and close her back up in a fraction of a second. A totally normal procedure. Zenas doesn't think there's anything special about it, but Till knows for a fact that no other healer could do something like that. She thanks Zenas for healing her, but he tells her a thank you isn't enough. He invested a lot into her, so he is going to need Till to work to pay him back. At first, Till thinks Zenas is going to ask her to service him with her body, but Zenas just wants her to give him directions to a particular plant he has been looking for. Till thinks that's a strange request, but she leads him to a bush with the leaves that he is looking for. She asks him if this is really all he wants from her because she is willing to do a lot more for him, but Zenas says this is enough. He always demands a fair price for the work he does for others, and her helping him find these leaves is all he needed from her, so all debts have been settled. He then tears up Till's slave contract and tells her she can do whatever she wants with her life now. Till doesn't really know what to do with herself now that she's not a slave anymore, but she is free to try all sorts of new things now, and it's all thanks to Zenas. She asks if she can come see him again, and Zenas says that if she is ever hurt, he will be glad to heal her, but not for free of course. Meanwhile, back at home, while Zenas was out working, Lily began preparing dinner. The food smelled so good that the resident ghost, Camilla, had to come down to see what was cooking. Lily notices her, and Camilla says she is excited to taste Lily's cooking, but the food won't be ready for a while, so she is going to have to wait in her room. Just then, a girl named Zofia came in looking for Zenas, but Lily tells her that he is out on a house call, so he's not here right now. Zofia was hoping to get Zenas all to herself by coming early today, but since he's not here, she decides to wait until he gets back. It looks like Zofia wasn't the only one who wanted to see Zenas today, because a few moments later, Linga shows up looking for him as well. Lily informs her that Zenas isn't here, so Linga says she'll wait, but she's surprised to see that Zofia is already here. She was hoping to lick Zenas all over while he inspected her body, but now that plan is ruined. A few moments later, an orc girl named Loie bursts through the door, so Lily goes to meet her and says she can join them inside, but only after she fixes the front door she broke. Loie likes Zenas too, but she actually came because she could smell Lily's cooking a mile away, and she really wanted to try it. Eventually, Lily is done cooking, so she was off to finish a couple of her chores and leaves the others in the kitchen. The second that Lily leaves the kitchen, the demi-human girls can no longer resist the smell of Lily's food, so they all go to give it a taste test, but they're definitely smart enough to know not to empty out the entire pot. Never mind, that pot looks pretty empty now. The three are starting to realize how badly they've messed up, because Lily is definitely going to be mad once she gets back. A few moments later, Lily returns and after seeing what has happened, she smiles at the girls and demands that they explain themselves. Later that night, Zenas finally returns home and Lily apologizes because dinner isn't ready like she had promised. There was a bit of a problem with the food, but she already found the solution. She sent the girls out to gather ingredients for her to make a new dish, and by the time they returned, they brought way more ingredients than she expected, so Lily will be able to make a feast tonight. But before that, she knows Zenas must have been working hard all day, so she says she'll prepare a cup of tea for him so he can relax. Zenas was once part of a world-class adventurer party, but one day, the party leader, Aston, throws a gold coin at him to remind him that he is poor and says he is kicking Zenas out of the party. He tells Zenas he is a worthless waste of space, and the party is better off without him, but Zenas knows for a fact that he is the only thing keeping this party together. However, Aston refuses to believe that. He only recruited Zenas to use him as a human shield since no one would care if he got killed in battle. But now that their party has become strong, Zenas tries to tell him that the only reason they are strong is because he is there to heal them every time Aston does something stupid, but Aston tells him his shady, self-taught healing skills are worthless, and any other healer could do a better job than him. Meanwhile, out in an alley, two slave traders are trying to hold an elf girl down so they can tie her up to be sold later. The woman warns her partner to be careful not to hurt Lily since elves are really rare, and they can get more money if she is in good condition. The man already has her pinned to the ground, but Lily refuses to go down without a fight, so if she kicks him in the balls and while he is wincing in pain, she starts running away. She probably could have escaped too, but unfortunately, the man had a bow, so he shoots her in the ankle. Lily falls to the ground, and she can't run away anymore, so the man catches up to her. He tries to hold her down again, but Lily bites his hand with the force of 1,000 chihuahuas, so the man has to stab her to get free. Zenas happens to be walking through that alley, and he finds Lily on the floor, bleeding out, and asks the two if they are the ones who did this to her. They tell them to freak off because slavery is perfectly legal in this country, and they own Lily, so they can do what they want with her. Zenas knows they are right, so he legally can't do anything to help Lily, but then he comes up with an idea and tells them he wants to buy Lily. He offers them the gold coins he got from Aston, and normally they'd refuse since elf slaves are worth way more than one gold coin, but since she's already bleeding out on the floor, they decide to take the money and leave. Once they are gone, Zenas walks over to Lily to see if she's still alive. Lily has already accepted her fate and is telling Zenas to just leave her here, but he tells her she's not going to die. Lily looks down at her wound, and she is surprised to see that Zenas has already healed her completely. She thanks him for his help and apologizes for the gold coins he spent to buy her, but Zenas didn't really want to keep it anyway since it reminded him of Aston. He asks Lily if she has a home to go to, but with her being a slave and all, it's pretty safe to assume she's broke and homeless. She's also very hungry, so Zenas offers to get her some food and clothes before they do anything else. Zenas ends up taking her to a diner nearby and buys her a new set of clothes along the way. Lily is happily eating the food Zenas bought for her, but she's a little confused since he didn't buy any food for himself. Zenas tells her he isn't hungry, but in reality, he's just really broke. He spent the last of his money on clothes and food for Lily, and since he got kicked out from Golden Phoenix, he's probably going to have to get a new job soon so he doesn't starve. Just then, a man stumbles into the diner, and it looks like his arm is hurt. He got into some trouble and he managed to make it out alive, but he's definitely not okay. Zenas takes a look at him from across the room and from the hole in his arm and the mild burn marks. He deduces that the man must have been shot by a magic gun. It's not that big of a deal since the guy is a lizard person, so the wound should be able to naturally heal within a few days, but then again, the wound is pretty deep so it'd be better to take care of it right now. Zenas stretches his hand out to cast heal on the man, and within a few seconds the hole in his arm seals back up. The man is surprised that his arm is suddenly back to normal, so he asks Zenas who he is, and before he can even respond, Lily declares that Zenas is a legendary healer. The man has never heard of him before, but he is really grateful for Zenas' help, so he hands him a couple of coins and promises to spread the word about him. Zenas was a little confused as to why the guy gave him money at first, but then he realized that healers usually get paid for healing people. That gives him an idea, so he decides to open a clinic and become a professional healer, but since he's from the slums, it'll be hard for him to get an official healing license. Plus, running a alleged business would mean he has to pay taxes, and in the words of Virgil, tax evasion isn't a crime, it's an obligation. That's why Zenas is going to become an underground healer. Lily doesn't really understand what he's talking about, but if Zenas is going to open a clinic, then she wants to help him. Zenas thinks about it for a second, and since opening a clinic without a license would be illegal, he's not sure if it's right to drag an innocent kid into this. But Lily reminds him that he purchased her a few minutes ago, and that makes him her master, so it is her duty to follow him no matter how many laws he breaks. Zenas didn't really intend to become her master though, he just wanted to help her out. Lily then points out that she has nowhere to go, so if he doesn't take her with him, then it'll be his fault if she ends up as a slave again. Zenas eventually relents and agrees to let Lily come with him, so she swears that she will serve Zenas with every inch of her body, but he asks her to please not make this weird. Anyway, if Zenas is going to open a clinic, he's going to need to solve his current homelessness issue, so he takes Lily to an abandoned section of the city to look for a place to stay. Lily asks Zenas why he wants to live here, so he explains that he needs to stay hidden, so the Royal Association doesn't find out about his illegal clinic. Plus, of how spooky this place is, the property values are the perfect price for his empty wallet is free. Lily can't deny that, but she is still worried because she knows that scary monsters tend to live in places like this. The two of them eventually find a house that is still intact, so Zenas thinks he just hit the jackpot. But as soon as Lily sees the place, she is terrified because this looks like a textbook haunted house. If they get unlucky, they might even run into a wraith. Zenas has no idea what a wraith is, so Lily explains that wraiths are terrifying undead monsters who can turn people into ghosts with a single touch. They head inside, but it's pretty dark, so Lily offers to use her magic to provide some light. Zenas is surprised that Lily can use magic, but she can only use basic spells, so she doesn't think it's very impressive. With the room lit up, they can now see everything clearly, and it's just as bad as Lily thought it would be, but Zenas is still pretty optimistic. This place still has a good roof and the support pillars are sturdy, so it's perfect for their clinic. However, they run into one major problem. There's actually a wraith here, and she says she's going to suck Zenas dry of his life force. Lily is freaking out, but Zenas is just disappointed that the house was already occupied. Camilla charges at Zenas, but he easily knocks her back with a heal spell and destroys both of her arms. He isn't intimidated by Camilla at all because back when he was in Golden Phoenix, Aston would often send him into the labyrinth alone whenever he was in a bad mood, and Zenas would constantly run into wraiths down there, so he has defeated at least 100 of them. It turns out that healing magic is pretty effective against undead monsters. Back on topic, he apologizes to Camilla for barging into her home like this, but there aren't any other options around here, so he asks if she's okay with him moving in. Camilla feels insulted that Zenas would even suggest moving in with her, the Queen of Wraiths, so she summons a ton of her ghost servants to get rid of him. However, Zenas casually uses a high heal spell to wipe all of them out. Camilla is stunned by the power Zenas possesses, and she's starting to worry that he might exorcise her, but he really doesn't want to fight Camilla. He knows this rude to move in like this, but he really needs a place to stay, so he asks her if she's willing to give him and Lily at least one bedroom and a place for them to treat future patients. Camilla knows she can't beat Zenas, so she tells him he can have the first floor, but she's keeping the second floor for herself. Zenas thinks that worked out pretty well, but Lily doesn't know if she should be more scared of Camilla or Zenas. By the next morning, Lily is really bored since there aren't any patients around, so she asks Zenas if she should go outside to do a little advertising, but Zenas doesn't think that's a good idea since the Royal Hospital might find out about this place. Besides, it shouldn't take too long for them to get their first customer, and sure enough, a few minutes later someone walks in. Lily stands up to go greet their first customer, surprised to see that it's the guy Zenas healed yesterday. Zenas have been expecting him to show up sooner or later since law-abiding citizens don't end up getting shot by magic bullets, and guys like him probably don't want to go to normal hospitals for obvious reasons. The man introduces himself as Zond and says he needs Zenas to take a look at his sister. Zenas says he will do what he can, so Zofia shows him her minor flesh wound. Zofia says her arm has been acting funny since yesterday, and after taking one look at the wound, Zenas deduces that Zofia was shot by some sort of magic with a poison attribute. Zofia asks him if there is anything he can do about it, but since Zofia spent all night with it like that, all her arm tissue is pretty much dead. He tells her it is better to just chop the whole arm off to avoid spreading the poison. Zofia is disappointed to hear that she has to lose an arm, but it is what it is, so she asks Zenas how much it will cost for Zenas to amputate it. He tells her she will have to pay 1,000,000 yen, and as soon as he says that, Zond is enraged because that is an outrageous price for a simple amputation. He is ready to throw hands over this, but Zofia tells him to calm down and starts trying to negotiate with Zenas. She asks him if he really wants to give her such a high price when she is Zofia the Swift. Zofia is the leader of one of the 3 gangs that run this area and Zenas is well aware of who she is, but he refuses to do work for free, especially because regeneration is so tiring. Zofia is confused since she has never heard of a healer who could regenerate limbs, and Zenas is confused as well since he didn't know other healers couldn't regenerate limbs. He trained himself to be a healer so he doesn't know what counts as normal. But that doesn't matter right now, so he asks Zofia if she wants to go through with the procedure. Zofia agrees, so Zenas sets her down on a table and gets ready to amputate the arm. He creates a magic scalpel to do it, but Zofia is a little concerned since she has never seen anything like it before. Zenas explains that it is just a blade of condensed magic that he can conjure at will. It is super sharp and completely sterile, so it's perfect for performing surgeries. But again, most healers can't do that. Zenas begins the operation and uses a constant flow of healing magic to numb the area. He then chops off the infected arm and gets ready to regenerate a new one. He raises the output of his healing magic and begins reforming Zofia's arm layer by layer until it's as good as new. Zofia is amazed and grateful that Zenas regenerated her arm, so she has no complaints about his price anymore. She also says she'll start sending her injured subordinates to Zenas if he's okay with it. And as long as they are paying customers, Zenas doesn't mind. Over the next few days, Zenas has been getting a lot of patients from the Lizardmen faction, so Lily makes some tea for him to relax. Zenas thanks her for being so considerate, but he wonders why she made 3 cups instead of 2. Lily says she made one for Camilla to drink, but Zenas isn't sure she'll want to join them down here. However, Camilla apparently really likes tea. While they are taking a break, Lily asks Zenas if he knows why the Lizardmen are always getting injured so badly, and from the people he has seen so far, he believes there's a turf war going on between the different factions. And speaking of factions, it looks like one of them just broke down the door. A group of werewolves barge into the clinic, and their leader Linga declares that she is going to kill Zenas. She has been fighting the Lizardmen for days now, but no matter how many of them she injures, they always keep getting better, so she is going to their healer. First of all, Zenas doesn't work for the Lizardmen faction, and he would like to avoid violence here. But Linga has already ordered her men to kill Zenas. However, with his defensive magic, nothing they do can even move him, much less deal damage. Linga realizes she can't beat Zenas, so instead, she resorts to destroying the clinic to get rid of him. But that was a dumb idea because this is still Camilla's house too, so she won't stand for someone destroying it. As soon as the other werewolves see Camilla, they are terrified because Wraith is a deadly monster that they could never hope to defeat. Camilla fully intends to drain them of their life force for what they did, but Zenas asks her to calm down because he doesn't want anyone to die in his clinic. And as long as Linga and her men are willing to fix the damage they caused, he will forgive them. The very next day, an orc shows up at the door with a message. Loey, the leader of the orc faction, wants to meet with Zenas personally. Zenas figured this was bound to happen sooner or later, considering he'd already dealt with 2 of the slum bosses. Loey was the big shot running things among the orcs and ogres, and she'd made a fortune mining magic stones with her raw strength alone. Dealing with her wasn't exactly ideal, but on the bright side, once he sorted things out with her, nobody would dare mess with his clinic again. Might as well get it over with now. Before heading out though, he paused to ask the orc if Loey was reasonable enough to actually talk things out. The orc assured him Loey was the wisest, most dignified person he'd ever meet, which sounded promising. But it made Zenas wonder why Loey didn't just come herself. When he asked, the orc explained that she couldn't actually move right now. That definitely didn't sound good, so Zenas wasted no more time and followed him straight to Loey. They ended up inside a cave, where Zenas was finally introduced to Loey. She greeted him warmly enough, but before he got started, Zenas asked her how she even found out about him in the first place. Loey casually mentioned that the lizard men and werewolves couldn't stop running their mouths about some top-secret healer they weren't supposed to mention to anyone. Clearly his days as an underground healer weren't lasting long at this rate, but he'd worry about that later. Loey then heard Zenas could heal any injury for the right price, and she wanted to see for herself if he really lived up to the hype. He walked over and raised his hand towards her, prompting Loey to ask what exactly he was doing. Zenas explained he couldn't see any obvious external injuries, so he was scanning her insides to check for internal damage. She seemed pretty surprised, since most healers apparently didn't know how to do that, but Zenas figured it should have been standard practice. After all, how the hell else could anyone treat a patient properly? Once Zenas completed his scan, he quickly noticed something off. There was a lump deep in her stomach radiating mana, which suggested it was probably a mana stone. Loey confirmed his guess and explained this wasn't just any stone, it was enchanted with explosion magic. So, if she tried to move even slightly, the whole thing might blow up. Zenas immediately thought someone must have tried to assassinate her by sneaking it into her food or something, but Loey clarified it wasn't anything sinister like that. In fact, she'd simply gotten really hungry, saw something that looked like a rice ball, and ended up swallowing the freaking stone by accident. She even insisted it was an honest mistake that anyone could have made. Zenas definitely doubted that, but he wasn't too worried either way. After all, mana stones usually found their own way out eventually. Zenas started heading out, but Loey stopped him saying things weren't that simple, because when she'd eaten that damn mana stone, she accidentally chewed it up, meaning there wasn't much time left before it blew. Loey had already made peace with dying because of her dumb mistake, but she couldn't bear the thought of her men refusing to abandon her. Zenas then asked what she expected him to do about it, and Loey explained she just wanted him there so she could leave all her wealth to him. Because if she exploded, the empire she built would collapse, and she'd rather have her fortune go to someone decent than let it fall into the wrong hands. Apparently, while researching Zenas, she found out he charged high prices for healing, but never took money for treating kids, which made her convinced he was a genuinely good guy. Loey then tossed him a key, explaining it would give him access to her treasure vault after her death, but Zenas never agreed to let her die in the first place. And considering she hadn't blown up yet, he knew she must have eaten the stone recently enough to save her. Without a second thought, he summoned his magic scalpel and moved right toward her. Loey's men initially panicked and tried stopping him, but before they could intervene, Zenas had already made his move. In just a few seconds, he'd sliced open Loey's stomach, pulled out the explosive mana stone, and healed her wound without a hitch. Everyone was speechless as he calmly showed them the dangerous stone in his hand. But the stone was still primed to explode, so to keep everyone safe, Zenas wrapped his hands tightly around it, containing the blast. The explosion could have easily wiped out the entire cave, but he shielded his hands with defensive magic beforehand, so despite the pain, he was fine. Afterward, Zenas handed Loey back her key, telling her there was no need to donate her fortune anymore. Loey couldn't quite believe that he'd actually chosen to save her instead of grabbing the cash, but Zenas shrugged it off, saying he only charged a fair price for healing, so taking an entire fortune would have been excessive. At that moment, Loey decided she genuinely likes Zenas, promising him that if he ever needed anything, he just had to ask, and she'd do whatever she could to help him. She'd been offered to deploy her warriors as guards around his clinic, but Zenas politely declined because having orc soldiers on his doorstep would attract too much attention. A few days pass, and Lily was sitting by the clinic's front desk, sulking because Sophia, Linga, and Loey had been coming by a lot more than usual. Zenas noticed that too because those three had been showing up regularly, but none of them seemed injured. He started wondering why they even bothered visiting, and at first, he thought they were probably just bored, but Camilla quickly corrected him, explaining that those women were clearly in love with him. Zenas couldn't wrap his head around that idea because in his eyes, he was just an ordinary underground healer and nothing special. But Camilla was confident she knew what she was talking about. Lily became worried at the idea that but Zenas assured her he'd never date any of them, not to be mean or anything, but he thought they were all kind of crazy weird. Still, Camilla warned it was only a matter of time before those three started a war to decide who got to claim Zenas. He thought things would never escalate that far, but as fate would have it. The very next day, Sophia came into the clinic with a basket of fruit, casually mentioning she planned to declare war on the other factions, for reasons she conveniently refused to explain. Right after her, Linga and Loie showed up as well, each bringing their own gifts and also talking about starting a war against the others. Zenas protested loudly, trying to get them to reconsider, but they flat out refused to listen. Camilla found the entire situation hilarious, joking that many people were about to die due to Zenas' apparent womanizing tendencies. Zenas didn't appreciate the way she put it, but there was no denying he had a major problem on his hands. The death match was already scheduled to begin at noon, and Zenas couldn't just sit back and let them kill each other over something this silly, so he had to take action. After a while at the stadium, Sophia, Linga, and Loie had already gathered their respective armies, fully prepared for an all-out brawl. The atmosphere was tense, and just as the battle was about to kick off, Zenas suddenly appeared, causing everyone to stop and look in his direction. The three girls watched him closely, waiting to see what he'd say, but Zenas surprised everyone by calmly stating he wasn't there to stop them. He acknowledged their long-standing grudges against each other, and figured it was better to let them fight it out until they were satisfied, instead of trying to force a peace they didn't want. With Zenas' blessing, the girls all agreed they would fight with everything they had, and as an added incentive, whoever survived the fight would get to claim Zenas' virginity. Zenas didn't recall agreeing to that damn part, but before he could object or clarify anything, the battle had already started. Sophia was the first to make a move, lunging forward with her daggers aiming straight for Linga's neck, but Linga quickly dodged the attack, backflipping to safety. In that instant, Loie jumped into action, trying to flatten Sophia with a flying dropkick. But Sophia saw it coming just in time, sidestepping the attack, which resulted in Loie accidentally smashing into some poor background characters instead, as if she were bowling. Sophia and Linga fought again, their weapons locked as they struggled to overpower each other. Just as they were about to land decisive blows, Loie returned to the fray, leaping down from above and nearly crushing both of them beneath her massive attack. Sophia stumbled into the orc section of the stadium, prompting her to fight her way out, and soon everyone else followed suit, turning on each other's factions and triggering complete chaos. The scene quickly became brutal, people slashing, cutting, and throwing punches left and right. Yet, astonishingly, even after 6 relentless hours of battle, not a single combatant had fallen. It was at that moment Sophia suddenly noticed something strange. The wounds on her arms were healing themselves right before her eyes. Everyone paused, bewildered, until Zenas finally spoke up and explained he was responsible. He told them plainly that he'd agreed to let them have their little death battle, but he never once said he'd let anyone actually die. After all, they were still his patients, and he wasn't going to let any shit happen to them. Sophia felt silly for not realizing Zenas' involvement sooner, but none of them had ever imagined a healer could heal so many people simultaneously, let alone continuously over 6 hours straight. The girls finally understood the Zenas had been trying to make. Their fight would literally never end as long as he was there to keep healing them. If they couldn't find a way to get along, they'd be stuck in an endless cycle of pointless conflict, and just to be clear, he reminded them he planned on billing each of them for every hour he'd spend healing. Realizing how foolish they had been, the three girls finally agreed to set their differences aside. So, they promised to maintain peace among their factions. But as far as fighting over Zenas went, they were still determined. Only this time, they agreed they'd compete peacefully without any damn bloodshed. Meanwhile, Lily approached Zenas, curious as to why the hell he'd gone through all the trouble of intervening in the battle. Zenas paused for a moment, remembering something his old teacher once told him. A healer who could only mend wounds was third-rate. A second-rate healer could restore the entire body. But a first-rate healer was someone who could make the world a better place. Zenas admitted he wasn't sure if he had it in him to be a first-rate healer, but that didn't mean he wouldn't try. He'd want to improve life in these slums somehow, and besides, he joked that if everyone died, he'd run out of patience. Lily smiled softly to herself, knowing full well that Zenas' tough talk was just his way of covering up how much he truly cared. After all, if the demi-humans stopped fighting, he'd actually have fewer patients coming in, which meant less money for him. Yet, he still chose peace over profit, and this genuine kindness was exactly why Lily liked him so much, and she told him as much directly. Of course, her words went straight over Zenas' head, leaving him slightly confused. In any case, it was getting late, and Zenas decided it was time to go collect payment and head back home. Lily was a bit taken aback. She had thought Zenas was joking earlier when he said he charged them for all the healing during their battle, but apparently, he was completely serious. Healing an entire stadium full of people was exhausting work, and there was no way he'd let something like that slide without compensation. At the same time, over in the capital, the commander of the Royal Knights was meeting privately with the Vice Commander Krishna. Noticing the commander's troubled expression, Krishna asked if something had happened. He explained he'd heard a strange rumor. Apparently the long-standing war among the demi-human factions and the slums had abruptly come to an end. Krishna found this difficult to believe. Those factions had been locked in a bloody feud for years, so it seemed impossible they'd suddenly decided to play nice. The commander agreed it sounded unlikely, but if true, this was potentially a serious problem. The kingdom had been stable for centuries precisely because the impoverished, disenfranchised people were always too busy fighting among themselves to cause trouble for the nobility. So, if these factions found peace and united, they could demand changes, perhaps even outrageous stuff like rights, equality, and maybe even free healthcare. And that shit would be a big problem. Rumors had it that a single individual was responsible for mediating peace between these factions. Determined to eliminate this threat, the commander tasked Krishna with dealing with him. Krishna accepted the assignment without hesitation, promising she would track down this troublemaker and arrest him for the crime of disturbing the war by bringing the damn peace. Meanwhile, back at Zena's clinic, Zenas sneezed suddenly, which made everyone around him worry that he might have caught a cold. Linda immediately offered her fluffy tail as a blanket, while Loie enthusiastically invited him to warm up by burying his face between her legendary black cushion. And that shit makes Lily so devastated because she didn't have either of them. Zenas then insisted it was nothing more than a regular sneeze, reminding them all that he still needed to heal Zofia, so they should probably quiet down until he finished his work. After carefully healing Zofia's injured arm, Zenas asked her how the hell exactly she'd managed to hurt herself, since it had been a long time since he needed to patch her up. Zofia admitted she'd gotten hurt on the job last night. Her usual work involved stealing from corrupt nobles and redistributing the wealth to the poor, but this time, she was caught sneaking into the wrong aristocrat's home. She had encountered Krishna, the vice commander of the Royal Knights, a ruthless woman known for shooting first and asking questions later, typically with her magic fire guns. Hearing this, Camilla began to worry that catching Krishna's attention might spell trouble for Zenas. But Zenas wasn't particularly concerned. After all, he figured there was no reason for someone as high-ranking as Krishna to care about a low-profile, underground healer like himself. Elsewhere in the slums, Krishna was already prowling around, gathering information on Zenas. She noticed the demi-humans coexisting peacefully, which made her suspicious, so she approached a lizard man and asked bluntly who was responsible for ending the demi-human war. The lizard man didn't recognize Krishna, but he was fully aware Zenas wanted to keep his identity hidden, so he refused to say anything and tries to walk away. But Krishna wasn't having it and drew her gun, threatening to shoot his precious stick if he didn't talk. However, the lizard man didn't budge. He was ready to take a bullet if it meant protecting Zenas. Just then, Zofia and her brother happened to pass by. Seeing them approach, Krishna realized she wasn't prepared to deal with Zofia right then, so she quickly slipped away into the abandoned section of the city. Wandering aimlessly, she stumbled upon Zenas' clinic by sheer luck and decided to go inside to ask for directions back to the main city. Zenas kindly offered to show her the way, but right as he was about to help her out, Lily walked into the room with some tea. The moment Krishna caught sight of Lily's elf ears, her expression darkened instantly, and without warning, she drew her magic fire gun and fired a blast directly at Zenas' head. Lily finds it unbelievable that Krishna would suddenly shoot Zenas in the head like that, but Krishna insists that she had a completely valid reason for doing it. Aside from her primary mission, she was also tasked with investigating a series of recent kidnappings in the region, and seeing that Zenas was a human and Lily was an elf, she immediately jumped to the conclusion that Zenas must have been the kidnapper, so her first instinct was to blast him. Krishna's logic has numerous flaws, so Lily quickly clarifies that Zenas essentially adopted her, and she's staying here willingly. Krishna soon realizes she may have rushed to judgment, and upon further consideration, it would indeed be strange for a kidnapping victim to appear as cheerful as Lily. Fortunately, the bullets she used were non-lethal, so she assumes she didn't kill Zenas, though she suspects he might have been knocked unconscious by the impact. Yet to her astonishment, Zenas seems completely unharmed. She apologizes for hastily shooting him due to her mistaken assumption, yet she remains curious as to how he survived without an injury. It explains that he simply used defensive magic to block the bullet before it reached him, but Krishna doubts this, stating that ordinary defensive magic should never be capable of blocking her bullets. As far as Zenas is aware, his defensive spells should be perfectly ordinary, so he doesn't quite understand her point. However, throughout her career as the vice commander of the Royal Knights, she has witnessed numerous types of defensive magic, and she immediately recognizes that Zenas' shield matches that of a grand sorcerer. The moment Krishna mentions her position as vice commander of the Royal Knights, Zenas and Lily instantly become uneasy, realizing that her presence could cause significant trouble for them. Krishna, however, evidently has something specific she wishes to request from Zenas. Hoping to avoid further confrontation, Zenas agrees to speak with her, but simultaneously sends a discreet warning to all his clients, urging them not to visit while Krishna is present. They all sit down together, and Krishna explains to Zenas that she's currently undertaking the covert mission and would like his cooperation. Zenas insists that he doesn't wish to become involved, but Krishna argues that it's the duty of every citizen to cooperate with the orders of knights. Given Krishna's unpredictable nature, Zenas figured refusing could end with another bullet to the face. so he reluctantly decides to go along with her request. Krishna then informs him that her mission is to locate a specific man and arrest him immediately upon identification. She has neither a name nor description, but the person she's after is the mediator responsible for ending the conflict between the various factions. Zenas chokes on his tea once he figures out that the individual Krishna is attempting to capture is actually him, but he remains calm and inquires why she's pursuing the mediator. Krishna clarifies that the Knight's Orders absolutely can't disregard someone who possesses the ability to create peace among the factions, but when she resorted to aggressively questioning one of the he refused to give her any damn information despite her threats. From Krishna's perspective, if the residents of the slums won't betray the mediator, it must imply he's a sinister mastermind who needs to be stopped. Zenas attempts to reason with her, suggesting it's entirely possible that this mediator is deliberately keeping a low profile, so if she simply leaves and abandons her search, he likely won't cause any issues. Krishna then asks Zenas if he personally knows who the mediator might be, so he quickly makes up an excuse, saying he's merely speaking intuitively. Regardless, Krishna insists that she can't just ignore the mediator since she received explicit orders from her commander, and anyone capable of ending the conflict between the factions represents too significant a risk to ignore. Lily intervenes and tells Krishna there's no need to worry about the mediator destabilizing the country, because his only interest is earning money through honest labor. But judging by the way Lily is describing the mediator, it sounds as if she knows him personally. Lily immediately panics and quickly assures Krishna that she doesn't know the mediator either, causing Krishna to grow somewhat suspicious, but she decides to let it slide for the moment. As it's getting late, Zenas uses this as an opportunity to encourage Krishna to leave, but while he's escorting her out, she notices the bed placed in the corner. She finds it unusual that Zenas would position a bed in this spot, causing Zenas to grow anxious because it's actually the clinic's patient bed, prompting him to nervously claim it's just an extra bed. Upon hearing this, Krishna promptly asks Zenas if he'd be agreeable to letting her use it. She's been struggling to secure a base of operations within the slums, so she'd greatly appreciate it if Zenas allowed her to stay here until she finishes her assignment. Of course, she's more than willing to compensate him for the lodging. Zenas can't really decline without raising Krishna's suspicions, so he reluctantly agrees and Camilla finds the whole scenario amusing. Lily then prepares some green tea for their new guest, but Krishna struggles with hot beverages, so she begins blowing on it to cool it down. Lily remains envious that yet another woman has appeared vying for Zenas' attention away from her, so to prove her dominance she sits directly on Zenas' lap and asks him to stroke her head like usual. Zenas complies with Lily's request, but he's slightly puzzled by her sudden demand, prompting Camilla to approach and inform him that Lily is feeling jealous. Zenas is caught off guard because Camilla suddenly whispered into his ear while she was invisible, but she's just really intrigued by all the drama going on. Lily is determined not to let Krishna take away Zenas' attention, so she becomes even more affectionate with him than usual, asserting her dominance. However, Krishna doesn't seem to give a damn, and just keeps blowing on her tea like nothing's happening. But eventually, Lily dozes off, so Zenas gently tucks her into bed and heads back to the living room to continue his conversation with Krishna. He fills her in on the whole story about how he rescued Lily from the slave trader, adding that those scumbags were part of an illegal trafficking network operating around here. And that explains why Krishna was so quick to pull the trigger earlier, that sadly Zenos doesn't have any real intel on the traffickers themselves. Changing the topic slightly, Krishna brings up something she's been curious about. Given how it's obvious Zenas must be an extremely skilled mage, having perfected his defensive magic, Krishna wants to know if someone could regenerate an entire arm if they put the same amount of effort into healing magic. Zenas starts to question whether healing an arm is really such a rare feat for a healer, but before he can complete his thought, Krishna interjects, insisting that it should be impossible. The only individuals who could achieve something like that would be saints or healers of the absolute highest caliber. Confused about why she is bringing this up, Zenas asks Krishna for an explanation. Krishna then describes how she recently fought against Zofia, recalling that she severely damaged Zofia's arm during the confrontation. However, when she saw Zofia again yesterday, her arm was fully restored. Krishna is convinced there must be a healer in the slums powerful enough to regenerate limbs, and if that's the case, it would make sense for someone like that to have serious influence over the faction bosses. Krishna intends to continue her investigation the next morning, hoping to discover some clues about this supposed evil healer, but Zenas doesn't understand why she automatically assumes the healer would be evil. In fact, Krishna seems to harbor a very negative opinion in the entire slum, prompting Zenas to ask if she has a specific reason for feeling that way. Krishna admits she may have a biased perspective, but it stems from someone from the slums murdering her mother. Krishna's mother was a compassionate woman who genuinely wanted to help everyone she could. She frequently visited the slums and organized events to distribute food to those who couldn't afford to eat, but one day she simply didn't return. Ever since then, Krishna lost the ability to laugh or even show a slight smile, which is one of the reasons people started calling her the Iron Rose. And according to the accounts of witnesses, Krishna's mother was murdered and robbed for her wedding ring, and learning this completely shattered Krishna. Her mother had saved countless lives from starvation, yet no one stepped forward to save her in her time of need. This tragic event motivated Krishna to join the Knight's Order and become an unstoppable hero who could deliver justice to the criminals living within the slums. The following day, Krishna leaves to continue her investigation, allowing Zenas to resume treating his patients. Zofia visits the clinic with a minor injury on her arm and asks Zenas to examine it. Zenas begins treating her, but advises Zofia to be cautious since Krishna could return at any moment. In speaking of Krishna, she suddenly appears at the clinic to ask for directions after getting lost on her way out again. As soon as Krishna notices Zofia, she immediately draws her guns, prompting Zofia to retaliate by pulling out her knives, so a brief standoff ensues between them. Krishna then questions Zofia, asking if there's genuinely an evil healer assembling criminals to threaten innocent people. Zofia doesn't deny the existence of a healer, but insists that he definitely isn't evil. While Zofia herself is a thief and doesn't strictly follow the law, she knows firsthand that some among the nobility are guilty of far greater crimes. For example, Zofia is aware that Krishna is investigating the trafficking ring, and after conducting her own research, Zofia discovered that the mastermind behind it is actually an aristocrat. Initially, Krishna doesn't believe her, as the trafficking ring is known to operate primarily in the slums. But Zofia clarifies that this is merely a clever deception intended to mislead the Knight's Order from uncovering the true criminal behind it all. Krishna remains skeptical but requests that Zofia reveal who is responsible for the kidnappings, prompting Zofia to name a man called Calendar. Krishna finds this difficult to accept considering Calendar is widely recognized as a generous philanthropist who prides himself on educating orphaned children and thus could never be involved in child trafficking. Zofia expected that Krishna wouldn't trust her, given that Krishna sees everyone from the slums as criminals. However, the mediator has never treated them that way. Instead, he treats everyone fairly and consistently gives people second chances, unlike Krishna and her misguided version of justice. Krishna becomes furious when Zofia insults her concept of justice, and she's about to fire her gun, but Zenas steps in front of her, demanding that Krishna lower the damned weapon. Krishna orders Zenas to step aside, but he refuses, saying he can't allow harm to come to Zofia since she's his patient. He apologizes for not being upfront earlier, but he confesses that he's actually the mediator Krishna has been searching for. Krishna assumes Zenas is just lying to protect Zofia because there's no way he could possibly be a healing mediator. After all, he's already demonstrated mastery over defensive magic, and there's no way in hell he could also excel in healing magic. Zenas doesn't necessarily consider himself a master, but he's certain of his abilities in both healing and defensive magic, since both simply require him to enhance the body's natural processes. Krishna finds this entire explanation absurd and remains unconvinced that Zenas is the healer. Although it's evident he's siding with Zofia, out of respect for the hospitality Zenas provided her yesterday, Krishna decides to exit peacefully without engaging in conflict. As Krishna leaves, Lily notices she's heading towards the district inhabited by aristocrats, prompting Zenas to suddenly realize her destination. Krishna took Zofia's accusation against Calendar seriously, prompting her to visit his manor to investigate. Obviously, she can't directly confront him about the child trafficking allegations, so Krishna fabricates an excuse for her presence. He tells him that she's heard about a recent increase in theft in the area, and Calendar confirms he's been experiencing difficulties with the Lizard Men gang lately. Krishna then informs him that she plans to boost security patrols in response. However, before implementing these patrols, she wishes to inspect Calendar's estate to gauge his current security measures. Calendar understands her reasoning and readily offers to guide her on a tour of his mansion. Krishna is then shown throughout the entire manor, and after the tour concludes, Calendar asks her opinion on his security setup. Krishna praises him for his meticulous approach to safeguarding the estate, but during her inspection, something odd catches her attention. She requests permission to use the restroom before departing, and Calendar sees no issue with this, so she slips away from his office. Given Calendar's high social standing, extensive security isn't unusual, but Krishna finds it peculiar that so much effort has been devoted to protecting the backyard area. Suspecting something might be hidden there, she peers over the wall and quickly notices a hidden entrance. Krishna cautiously makes her way down the passage, and to her shock, she realizes Zofia was telling the truth, that Calendar truly was behind all the kidnappings. But before Krishna has the chance to aid the captured children, Calendar sneaks up behind her, grabs the gun she left upstairs, and blows off her arm. He laughs at how effortlessly he managed to defeat a knight, taunting her for poking her nose where it didn't belong. Now he simply needs to finish her off and resume his trafficking business. But just as he's about to make his next move, Zofia and Zenas arrive. Zenas had become concerned when he realizes where Krishna was headed, so he asks Zofia to lead him there. Calendar is determined to leave no witnesses, so he switches Krishna's gun to lethal mode and shoots Zenas straight in the face. Yet to Calendar's complete disbelief, Zenas remains unharmed, though he admits the lethal shots did sting quite a bit. Calendar panics, attempts to escape, but drops the gun in his frenzy, allowing Zenas to pick it up. Calendar immediately begins begging for mercy, and luckily for him, Zenas has a strict no-kill policy. However, Zenas doesn't have any rules against causing pain, so he switches the gun to non-lethal and fires directly at Calendar's head, knocking him out. He quickly moves to Krishna's side, but she meekly tells him it's pointless because her arm is gone and a large portion of her stomach has been blown away. She's accepted her death, but Zenas reassures her she'll be alright, though he's definitely going to charge her heavily for his services. so she should brace herself for a damn expensive bill. Moments later, Krishna is fully healed, astonished by Zena's ability to instantly repair such critical injuries. She finally accepts that he was truthful about being the mediator, but her interest in arresting him has vanished entirely as she now views him as a genuine hero. Zenas, however, doesn't consider himself a hero at all. He was simply a healer doing his job by ensuring nobody died. If anyone deserves to be called a hero, it's Krishna herself because she was the one who first took action for the children's sake. She might have been misguided occasionally, but deep down, she genuinely cares and wants to create a better world. Zofia and the lizard men then assist in freeing the children from the dungeon, but with the royal knights approaching fast, Zenas isn't interested in dealing with them, so he decides to leave with the others. However, before he departs, Krishna stops him, curious why he decided to save her despite her being an enemy at the time. Zenas simply turns around and replies that he wanted to ensure she pays her outstanding bills. She still owes him money for the night she spent at his clinic, and now there's the additional cost of healing. He expects full payment by the week's end. Krishna, amused by his ridiculous reasoning, laughs for the first time since the loss of her mother. The following day, we observe Zenas and Lily strolling along the street, discussing their plans to buy some tea, when suddenly he notices the place he used to occupy back in the slums, prompting him to remember his past. He had been a destitute orphan living in the slums with absolutely nothing to his name, spending all of his time just sitting around in an alleyway. One day, Aston was wandering through the slums, trying to choose a child to kidnap, but thus far he's frustrated because none appears suitable enough to serve as human shields. At that moment, he notices Zenas and decides he's perfect, approaching and initiating a conversation with him. Essentially, Aston says to Zenas, "You're impoverished, jobless, and starving, so join me on an adventure." He speaks with a polite demeanor, infused with false kindness, leading Zenas to mistakenly think Aston is genuinely nice. Despite this, Zenas hesitated to accept because it's rare for slum dwellers to become adventurers. However, Aston assures him that as long as he possesses the skills, he can accomplish anything. Aston then asks Zenas if he has any particular skills, to which Zenas responds that he knows some healing magic, but Aston is highly skeptical, since mastering healing magic typically takes years of rigorous training at the Royal Academy, making it improbable for a random orphan to learn it independently. Nevertheless, whether Zenas truly knows healing magic or not doesn't matter to Aston because he intends to use Zenas merely as a distraction if anything goes awry. Once Zenas agrees to join him, Aston takes him into the forest. There, the pair confront a wolf monster. During the battle, Aston gets slightly injured, prompting Zenas to heal him using his magic. Then Aston charges the wolf and Zenas employs his healing magic again to enhance Aston's speed, enabling Aston to decapitate the wolf effortlessly with a single strike. Aston, however, strangely fails to notice that his injury is healed mid-combat or that he suddenly moved faster at a crucial moment, leaving him convinced that Zenas is utterly useless. After several years of enduring this dynamic, Aston eventually expels Zenas from the party, and we know how Zenas has spent his time since then. However, Aston's group hasn't fared quite as well because after removing Zenas, Aston and the remaining party members set out toward a cave for their next mission. This mission holds significant importance as they intend to leverage it to curry favor with influential nobles within the kingdom, though all of them resent the intense labor involved. Yuma then informs them that the quicker they finish their task, the quicker they can return to the inn and resume drinking. Andres feels thrilled because ladies always flock around them whenever they see their members of the Golden Phoenix group. After all, their team is renowned for successfully finishing quests and defeating magical creatures without taking any damage. Right at that moment, they encounter the creatures they're here to defeat, so Aston unsheathes his blade and prepares to strike. He instructs Guile to cast protective magic on him while he rushes ahead, and Guile does precisely that, but even while Aston is battling the wolves, his arm still gets scorched. And at the same time out back, Yuma is being attacked by one of the wolves, so he's out of the picture for good. Aston shouts at Andres to quickly cast some offensive spells, but it takes a damn long to finish chanting the incantation, and he even gets blasted by a fireball mid-spell. Aston is stunned and questions whether his group has always been this damn incompetent, but it's evident they're not going to win this battle, so he commands everyone to withdraw immediately. Once they're out the hell, Aston questions his teammates why they're having difficulty against monsters that barely reach B rank, but Andres reminds him he wasn't particularly effective against the wolves either. Guile asks Aston if there's a chance Zenas had been truthful when he claimed he was healing them, but Aston finds it impossible since there's no way a lowly commoner like him could have possibly mastered healing magic. Still, to be cautious, Aston thinks it might be wise for their group to recruit a healer. Several days later, they go back to the cave after recruiting a healer, whose name is Yuman, but she informs Aston up front she's not skilled at battlefield healing. She typically provides healing services only in the capital, but she coincidentally possesses an adventurer's license, so she agreed to accompany them. Still, she wonders why the Golden Phoenix would even require a healer given their reputation for successfully completing missions without injury, but Aston refuses to explain what occurred, telling her instead to mind her own damn affairs. Guile then questions Yuman about whether Yuma will recover, as he was severely injured by the wolves last time. Yuman was the healer who treated him, so she's confident he'll survive, but considering how critical his wounds were, there's no possibility of him ever returning to adventuring. Yumin assumed Aston would show some sympathy toward a teammate who became permanently crippled, but he simply moves past it, stating Yuma wasn't valuable enough to keep around anyway. And if you were wondering why this quest holds such significance, a nobleman requested a scarf made from a fire fox's fur as a present for his daughter. If completing it places Aston in Lord Fennel's favor, he's prepared to put his life on the line for that scarf. Yet barely 2 seconds afterward, the plan crumbles because the wolves launch an unexpected ambush. Aston quickly retaliates and tells Guile to apply defensive spells to everyone, but as Aston moves into attack, he can't land a single blow against any of the wolves. The wolves then unleash 4 fireballs at him, and Aston manages to deflect 3, but the 4th fireball strikes Andres in the stomach, knocking him out immediately. Aston continues swinging fruitlessly at the wolves, but soon Yumin shouts that they must withdraw because Andres' condition is critical. Aston can't believe everything is collapsing yet again, and when they finally get outside, he snaps at Guile, demanding to know why he failed to shield Andres with defensive magic. However, Yumin points out that Guile's defensive spell was indeed effective, and without it, Andres would have been instantly killed by a blast of that magnitude. Aston impatiently demands that she heal Andres right away, but Yumin informs him that's impossible as only top-tier healers or saints possess the capability to instantly heal such severe wounds without proper preparation. Unless they rush Andres to a medical facility immediately, he won't survive. Sometime later, Aston speaks with Lord Fennel's servant, who informs him that Lord Fennel is extremely disappointed. Aston desperately asks for another opportunity, certain he can secure the fur for the scarf if given one more chance, but the nobleman's daughter's birthday has already passed, making the whole matter pointless. And the real reason behind Lord Fennel's dissatisfaction isn't merely that Golden Phoenix failed the quest. It's because Aston repeatedly promised he'd succeed. Had Aston simply informed Lord Fennel earlier that the mission couldn't be accomplished for any reason, Lord Fennel would have understood and chosen a different gift for his daughter. But that's not what Aston did, so for a brief moment, Aston tries shifting the entire blame for this disaster onto Zenas. However, he soon recalls he never formally registered Zenas as part of the party, so officially speaking, Zenas was never recognized as a member, meaning he can't be held accountable for anything. Swallowing his pride, Aston bows his head low, forced to apologize for the entire fiasco. And he sees inside, hating every second of having to lower himself before a servant. Aston then vows he'll find a way to make amends, but Lord Fennel's servant questions how exactly he'll accomplish that considering half his group is already nearly dead. Aston confidently replies that he intends to recruit replacements to offset their losses, and the next time Lord Fennel entrusts them with a task, he'll ensure its successful completion. Afterward, Lord Fennel's servant departs, though Guile asks Aston if making such promises is really a wise move. After all, they currently have no prospects on capable recruits, and there's no possible way for them to undertake missions with just 2 remaining members. Aston tells Guile there's no need for concern as he already has something in mind. Even though Aston still doesn't believe Zenas holds much value, he can't deny the team functioned much better while Zenas was with them, so Aston plans to simply bring him back. He's convinced Zenas would jump at the chance to rejoin Golden Phoenix, despite how poorly he'd been treated previously. The following day, Aston and Guile enter the slums searching for Zenas, but since they have absolutely no damn idea where to begin, Aston suddenly gets a brilliant idea. He decides to employ the 3 faction bosses to help locate Zenas, confident they'll agree because low-class scum like them will do practically anything for cash. A short while later, he has a lizard man guide him to Zofia, saying he's interested in hiring her services. Zofia isn't particularly enthusiastic, since this interferes with her daily clinic hours, but she's at least open to hearing on a paying customer. Aston introduces himself as the leader of Golden Phoenix, explaining to Zofia that he's searching for a man named Zenas who arrived in the slums around 2 months prior. At first, Zofia can't believe what's being said. Zenas had informed her all about how Aston kicked him out of Golden Phoenix, which had already seemed foolish, but she never imagined Aston would be stupid enough to go searching for Zenas afterward. She tells Aston to leave immediately, because Zenas has far more important things to occupy his time than dealing with him, and quite honestly, even looking at Aston makes her sick. Aston becomes offended, briefly thinking about attacking Zofia, but quickly realizes he'd get thoroughly beaten if he tried anything. So, he decides to back down. After Zofia refuses to assist him, Aston decides to approach Linga's faction instead, but the moment she realizes who Aston is, she immediately tells him to leave. Aston is shocked to learn Linga also considers herself Zena's friend, and just in case he's considering making trouble, Linga reminds Aston that if she wanted, she could easily kill him 3 times over before he even had a chance to blink. Aston then attempts approaching Loie for assistance, but like the others, she promptly tells him to go screw himself. She also threatens that if she ever hears he's been bothering Zenas, she'll personally crush his skull between her thighs. Aston and Guile immediately exit Loie's cave, and Aston struggles to believe that all the faction bosses care about Zenas this much. He tries convincing himself they must be referring to some other individual named Zenas, because there's absolutely no chance the Zenas he remembers could have such influence in this place. Speaking of Zenas, Guile coincidentally spots him walking along the street with Lily. Lily and Zenas just completed their shopping errands for the day and were preparing to return home when Aston suddenly calls out to Zenas. Zenas is startled to encounter Aston and Guile again, but he's not exactly thrilled to see them, so he begins walking away. Aston stops him and loudly announces that he specifically came here to welcome Zenas back into Golden Phoenix. But before Aston can even finish his sentence, Zenas flatly rejects his ass. Aston can't believe this rejection since he was sure Zenas would jump at the chance to return to their party. But Zenas begins listing every bit of mistreatment he endured under Aston, including the terrible conditions and insulting pay. There's literally zero incentive for Zenas to rejoin Golden Phoenix. But if Aston is truly desperate, Zenas suggests he could tag along for a few missions provided he's available. However, Zenas refuses to continue working merely for recognition, so Aston would need to offer him fair payment this time. Zenas demands $50,000 for minor healing and $1 million for major healing services. In addition, Aston must pay separately for Zenas' defensive spells and buffs. But if Aston finds these terms unacceptable, there's nothing else to discuss, so Zenas once again begins walking away. Aston feels deeply insulted that Zenas dares to reject his offer, so he unsheathes his blade and attempts an attack. But before he can get anywhere close, he's blasted back by Krishna. She tells Aston that it's downright idiotic to launch an attack right in front of a royal knight. She had actually come here looking for Zenas herself, but since Aston just attempted an assault, she's now obligated to place him under arrest. However, Aston quickly points at Guile, claiming he's the one who forced him into it, then immediately flees like a coward because he definitely doesn't want his ass to end up imprisoned. After all that shit show, Zenas and Lily return home for the evening, and shortly afterward Zofia, Linga, and Loie arrive. They inform Zenas that Aston attempted to hire them to track him down, and even though they all rejected his request, Zofia remains concerned that he might persistently keep coming after Zenas. If Aston decides to approach the unlawful underground guild, he might even manage to hire an assassin to go after Zenas purely out of resentment. However, hiring assassins typically requires substantial funds, and considering Aston was desperate enough to seek out Zenas personally rather than recruit additional party members, he's most likely broke. Despite this, Zofia is still uneasy, as she's heard unsettling rumors about a mysterious figure known as the Guide from the Underground Guild, who accepts assignments for free under specific circumstances. Thus, if Aston somehow convinces the Guide, it might spell serious danger for Zenas. Sometime later, Zenas finds himself unable to sleep because of all the tension caused by encountering Aston again, prompting Camilla to come downstairs to keep him company for some reason, since she's concerned about him. While she's there, Camilla asks Zenas if it's actually true that he learned healing magic in the slums, prompting Zenas to explain that he initially tried resurrecting a corpse, after which healing magic simply came to him naturally. Camilla remarks that resurrection magic is forbidden, but in Zenas' defense, he genuinely had no damn idea about the ban when he first experimented with it. On the topic of forbidden magic, Camilla remembers something resembling artificial life from her own lifetime. It occurred during the Demon Lord's reign, and he frequently waged war using golems animated by forbidden spells. Right at that moment, Zenas hears chaos erupting outside, so Camilla volunteers to investigate, and to her shock, she witnesses a significant portion of the slums engulfed in flames as a rampaging golem wreaks havoc.